Welcome back to Not Enough Projects. Today we're back on this 1973 Dart that we're currently going through and getting solid again. Last time we were working on this, we replaced both of the driver and passenger side floor pans, which is now covered in disintegrating headliner. This time we're going to be continuing on the sheet metal work on this car. It has a significant amount of rot around the rear window because this was a vinyl top car, which I don't know why they did that, but the vinyl tops hold moisture in, especially around the rear window. So let's go take a look at what we're working with and see what we need to do to get it fixed up. Alright, so let's start working on the rear window. First thing we gotta do is, of course, take the rear window out. I'm just gonna get a new gasket for it, so I think I'll just cut this one away with a razor blade so we don't have to mess around with the petrified gasket trying to save it and not crack the glass. So let's get a fresh razor blade and start cutting. So the gasket's not actually terribly hard right here, but as soon as you get up a little bit more, it starts getting really petrified. So, and obviously you don't want to pry against glass. Better just to spend the little bit of money, not risk breaking the glass. And I'm an amateur, so when it comes to glass, now it's because it's been sealed in before. Well, I'll spare you guys that and bring it back once rear window's ready to pop out. Okay, I think we're about ready to pop it out. Let's see how this goes. I guess we cut the top way. I was hoping it would slip out from under. It's fighting a little bit though. Okay, there we go. Intact glass. Go find somewhere safe for this, and we'll get the rest of the gasket out. You can see this, the rear tray is just totally gonzo. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is start removing all of this urethane gasket that's stuck behind, and once the bulk of that is off, I'm probably going to hit it with a wire wheel just to kind of remove any of the loose rust. You see we have some rot here. It's not all the way through, doesn't look like, so that may be okay, but you can see these holes all the way around. That's going to be a big pain. Those are all going to need patched. So you got our work cut out for us. Okay, now it's time to hit the wire wheel. Hopefully that cleans it up decently. Alright, I'll keep working on that and bring it back once it's cleaned up. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is actually sandblast this gently, just because it's hard to tell where the good metal ends, or where the good metal begins and the bad metal ends from just wire wheeling. See with these holes and whatnot, so the pitting's bad enough over here. I'm guessing we're going to have to replace this whole section. Luckily, the pitting doesn't really extend over onto the sail panel area, so that shouldn't be a super hard fix, although it is a pretty wide area. But we'll know more once I get this blasted. Probably open up these holes a lot more. All the way around. Okay, so I did some light blasting around the window area, and it did reveal some areas I didn't see initially. Pretty much along here we knew about that, but just some pinholes along the edge of the bottom that we're going to have to deal with. So, gonna be a decent chunk of body work, or of sheet metal work. I think we'll start with maybe this section here, just because it's easy to get to on the side. And the way I'm going to do this is just make it in sections. Luckily this isn't a super complicated sail panel, so we should be able to just do one panel or one piece of sheet metal for this. We should be able to make the bend up that'll kind of sit in here and meet. And I think we might as well just take all the pitting out, so we'll just come here, down, that'll be one piece, and then we should just need to do a second piece that does this inner edge, and we'll just come right to here. Luckily the inner edge is in pretty good shape all the way around, not real pitted. A little bit down here that we'll have to deal with, but on the bottom, of course, because the moisture gets trapped down here, that inner edge is a little bit more beat. So you can see we've got pinholes all the way across, so it's a bit of a pain, but it is what it is. Yeah, a lot of this pitting is really close to breaking through, so we're gonna have to replace the majority of it. But that's okay. Let's grab some sheet metal. Maybe we'll start with cardboard just so we can get a good size of the sheet metal that we need, and we'll start up here. Okay, so here's our cutout for this section. Just getting it pretty close to following that edge. So we'll cut that out of the sheet metal. I've got, I believe, 16 gauge, which is a little thicker than I would want to go with, ideally. I think 18 would probably be a little easier to work with, but 16 should be doable, and it's what I got. And hey, thicker's not gonna be any worse. It'd probably make it, well, a little easier too. Alright, so I'm gonna go cut that out, and then we'll get to forming that to follow the contour of the body. Alright, let's see how we did. Not terrible. Okay, so now I'm gonna start trying to bend it. So it is a complex bend in that it bends in multiple directions. So there's a bend this way and a bend this way. I think we'll start with this bend. So let's take it to the vise. We'll clamp this and just try to work it so that it kind of sits proper. It's not very significant bend this way. Okay, so clamp this in here. We'll just give her a little bit of a bend. Probably need to grab some implements. Would be perfect is one of those vice grips with a big flat clamp area. I do not have one of those though. Alright, so this should give us a little bit more leverage, and it's not a very big bend, so we'll just hopefully sneak up on it. Although in saying that, I probably did way too much. So let's go see how it fits. Yeah. See, I did a little much. So we'll flatten her back out a hair. And you can see we have this corner touching. This corner needs to come down along with both the upper corners. So the radius for the bend is kind of here-ish. Then we'll flatten it back out a hair. Try that. And then we need to bend kind of like this. Kind of hard to explain. Alright, let's try that. We do have a crease currently, which is not what we want, so that'll need worked out. But again, the sheet metal doesn't have to be perfect, and it's not going to be, because you can obviously do body work with plastic filler. But we should be able to get close enough that we just need a skim coat and not a ton. Okay, so we got to take a little bit out, bend here, so I'm just going to keep doing that back and forth. You kind of get the idea. And once it's pretty much dead on, I'll bring you guys back. Alright, so here we go. I think this is pretty decent. You see it's not really rocking or anything. It's not perfect at this corner, but one benefit of working with pretty thick sheet is we have quite a bit to shape with. So if we got to do just a little bit of sanding to get it to match the curvature properly, no big deal. So I think that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Might need to come down in the center just a hair, but it's not too bad. So for the next strip, this inside radius, most of the metal's actually okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll cut here, and then obviously with a hole there, we'll come past that just a bit. I don't want to do the whole radius if we can help it, and that'll make fitting this piece easier because we have some of the untouched metal to weld onto so that we know exactly where we need to be. So yeah, I'm going to mark where we're going to cut, and then this should be a whole lot easier to shape because it's really just one curve. So I'll get that cut out and bent. So here's our patch. That's how it's going to go. So there's our inside piece. So I think I'm going to weld these together. I'll tack it sitting on top of the current sheet metal. I'll weld the inside just for strength, and so that we have a little bit more meat to grind into for our radius on the edge here if we need it. And once we're satisfied with that, we will cut this out and commit. Alright, so I'm going to weld the two pieces together now using the car as a template. Got the dang gas. Alright, so there we go. There's our piece tacked together. I'm going to weld the inside solid, also weld the outside solid, and then we're going to grind this down into a decent bevel. Okay, so there we are, fully welded, cooled off with compressed air. Obviously you're not going to be able to sit it flush where it is going to be because of that weld inside, but you can at least check the general shape, which still feels good. So that means the heat didn't warp it too much. The inside weld we'll just leave. This I'm going to pare down using just a flap disc probably. So I'll go round that off, just at least take the high spot off. We'll probably do the final finishing once we have everything welded together in the car, but I'll get it close for now here. Okay, so there we are. Obviously we have some rounding off to do that we'll do since we're welded solid. Now we're ready for the part where we gotta commit. We're gonna cut the metal off the car. We're gonna go just a little bit inboard of these marks. We'll finish off that mark. That way we can kind of sneak up on the right size. We don't want to go over. I mean, it's not the end of the world if we go over. It's just going to be a big pain in the butt because when you have a big gap like that, sheet metal tends to blow out, as I'm sure you guys all know. So just cut around here, down, and around, and then we'll fit it in. Alright, so I pretty much got everything cut to size and cleaned up. Pretty close. So we do have a slight bow here, but that's no big deal because once I tack this corner and this corner, I'll push down and tack there. And then when I do that, this is nice and flush. So I'm pretty happy with that. Got everything cleaned up, so let's start welding it in place. And given that this is fairly thin sheet metal, we'll just do tack, tack, tack. It's probably not going to be pretty, but at the end of the day, it's getting ground down. Here we are so far, looking really good. I was able to get it nice and even with the body panel. So, pretty happy with that. I'm just going to finish tacking that out. Then I'll grind it flush, or pretty close to flush, and we'll do our final adjustments to make it seamless. Alright, so here we are. Fortunately it's not perfect on this surface. It's definitely going to need a little bit of filler. Not more than, you know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so, but you can definitely feel it. It dips down here, you can probably see it too. So I didn't quite capture that curve, or maybe it buckled the welding, who knows, but not a huge deal. I'm not going to claim to be a sheet metal working expert by any means, but just a little bit of filler we'll deal with that. I can live with it. The rest of it feels pretty good. Luckily this metal is welding really nice. I didn't have hardly any breaking away or, you know, burning up, so that's nice. Yeah, we'll have to fill that. No big deal. I'm gonna work on forming this edge. I'll probably use a die grinder with like a Rawlock disc or something. Something a little less aggressive, and also in here. So start working on that. Alright, I figured we'd switch sides and start working over here. I picked up some 18 gauge just because that's going to be a little easier to get the curve dead on. A little easier to bend. So I figured we'll do 2 patches up here. We really ought to take all of this pitted metal out because it's really hard to get the rust out of the pits, and I don't want any rust coming back, and we'd have to fill this obviously, and the pits are hard with the filler. Could cause a failure down the road. So I'm thinking we'll do a patch up here to about right there, and then we'll do another pretty large patch right here. That should go down to about here or so. So that's the same exact process. I'll Get a piece of cardboard so we know what size piece we need, and then I'll bring that 18 gauge over and we'll start fitting it up to the car. Alright, so we got the pieces cut out. This is our inner piece there. Fits nice. And then we got our top piece, which is real close. It just has a little bit of a bow right here. Not much, maybe like a 1/16. So what I'm going to do is clamp this down, and then when we weld the inner piece to this, it'll hold it right in place. So the 18 gauge helps a lot with being able to really match the curve a little bit better. So that should help. I'm going to clamp these solid onto here, and then we will tack them together. Weld the inside solid again. Cut and weld. Alright, so here's our fit up. This edge fits pretty nice. This edge has just a hair that we'll need to adjust when we weld it in. And I'm just going to hold this solid by hand, like so, and get it tacked. Got a little bit of a gap, but that'll be okay. Alright, so there we go. Tacked. I'm going to weld the back side solid. And there we are, fully welded up. Nice and pretty. Yeah, right. So I'm going to cut this section out, and then we'll see how it fits. So there's our piece cut out. Looks like we actually had a little piece of roof structure in here that I got a little too deep on, so I'm going to weld that back up and grind it solid, or grind it flush, so that we can fit our new piece on. But before we do that, let's fit this real quick. I'm sure we gotta adjust some. Yeah, we're gonna have to cut a little more. Not too shabby though once it sits down. Alright, I'm gonna deal with that. Alright, so I think we pretty much got it fit up here. See, that's not too bad at all. I'm just gonna tack the parts that are perfectly smooth and then just, lightly peen. Like this edge, for example, sticks up just a hair more than it should, so I'll peen that down slightly once we get it tacked. Same with that back edge. The frontmost edge is pretty dang close, so I'm happy with that. And then I'm just going to hold these two sides even to the current inside edge, and that'll make sure we're pretty much located properly. Alright, so I'm going to get that tacked in and we'll check it out. Alright, here we are, halfway welded. I think it's looking pretty good. And once you grind it down, it's going to look pretty solid. I'm going to finish welding that all the way, just letting it cool a little bit. And then we'll grind it down and see how it looks. Alright, so we're fully welded. I'm going to grind it down and see how we did. Alright, so here we are. Not terrible. I think when I welded it, it buckled a little bit right here, because we have a little bit of a scallop. You can see. So, is what it is. We'll have to fill that. Again, I'm no sheet metal expert, but this is going to be good enough. We're not doing a concourse restoration on this thing. Overall, not bad. So I'm just going to repeat the exact same process here and on the 40 other spots that need new sheet metal. So I'm going to work my way through that. You guys get the gist of what I'm doing, and I'll bring it back once I have it pretty much all done. Alright, so this is kind of an interesting area. I figured I'd cover it, making progress on all these patches. It's pretty quick down here because for a lot of these, just this inner piece needs put in. I got a whole bunch of grinding to do, but most of the patches are there. So this piece had these cuts come out, or opposite, but you can see super pitted, so I just cut the whole thing out. And I'm kind of thinking on the seam, since it's a vinyl top car, this needs filled, because we're not putting a vinyl top back on it, I don't believe. So it's going to need filled. A lot of guys just use body filler, which isn't necessarily my favorite thing, if you can avoid it. Some guys weld it up, but I figure we're here, so we can probably just lap sheet metal over in this gap, and then minimize the amount of filler we're going to need to use. Since I sandblasted this all the rust was mostly off, and then I hit it with some of the Rust-Oleum Rust Reformer just to take care of anything else, and also protect what's going to be under the sheet metal. this piece, since this is going to get cut out, I'm just making the bridge out of the one piece, which fits in decently. I'm going to have to do a little bit of adjusting, but for the most part it fits pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with how that body line is going to flow. Of course, it's probably going to need some adjusting with hammer and filler, but that'll get us in the ballpark. Good. Alright, I'm going to weld that in. Okay, so I've got one side basically done. The goal here is, like I was saying, just fill that seam so that you don't need so much filler, especially with that rough surface. It is hard to get filler to actually adhere there well, which is why they use lead way back when, the factory. So it's all pretty much a little low on here, but that still saves a ton of filler work, and hopefully will result in a better product. But you can kind of see the low spot right here, which was kind of the goal, because you can bring it back up to perfect with filler. I'm pretty happy with this whole section. I got to do the whole thing again on the other side. And I still got to shape the edge here, do some shaping along the patches over there. But beyond that, we are pretty close to getting this thing in primer around the window and start filling to where it should be. Alright, so I think we are just about ready to actually put primer on this. What I did is I went around and finished up any of the sheet metal work that we still had going on, and then I went over everything and sanded with 180 grit, which is what our primer calls for. I'll go over that in a second. And got everything cleaned off with wax and grease remover, prep all. So at this point we should be good to go. And there are imperfections that we're going to see how well the primer kind of deals with it. Just as far as, you know, not every little tiny divot is welded up. So, because, you know, sometimes when you weld, there's a little, not a pinhole because it doesn't go through, but a little divot. So we'll see. I may need to go back around after we primer and re-weld that. But if I did that straight off the bat, I'd be spending much time welding every little bit up. So we'll get this in primer. I got everything feathered out a little bit to about here and like here and up here. Also went with the wire brush on any of the rust pitting that was still on the metal, because any rust that's on there is going to get sealed in, and we don't want that. So all the rust is cleared out of these divots, and not all the rust is cleared out of here because I just want any of the bare metal primed, and whenever we prime the whole car, we'll just start partway into the primer and go 80 grit wherever to remove all the rust that's under the paint, because there's obviously rust under the paint. So I'm just going to be using one of these cheapo Harbor Freight guns. It's a 1.4 tip, which is what we need for our primer, and it's nice for the primer because especially epoxy primer, because if you don't clean it out perfect, who cares? It was a $15 gun or whatever. And as far as our primer, we're going with this Summit brand direct-to-metal epoxy primer. So it just mixes a 1-to-1 with the catalyst. So we'll mix that up. We're not going to need hardly any. And we'll do 2 medium wet coats, which is what this calls for. See, it's real simple. And it's kind of cold today, so we'll give it probably an hour or so in between the 2 coats that we'll do. Or if 1 coat looks good, we may just leave it at 1 coat. So yeah, I'm going to get everything hooked up. We'll mix this up and start spraying. Alright, we're about ready to go, so I'll fill the gun up and spray. Alright, so I'm going to let that flash. And I think this actually has like almost a 2-hour pot life, so still got some left over in here. Enough for the next coat. So I'll bring it back once it's time to coat again. Alright, so I did a second coat. I'm going to let this dry for probably a couple of days, if not more, since it's kind of cold. Keep it in the sun tomorrow, and hopefully it cures up right. And then we're ready to put body filler on. Oh, look, that revealed a little pinhole. I didn't even notice that. So there'll be probably a lot of going back around and touching stuff up. We got a little bit there where the weld was too thin. So, and we got to run. I should have mentioned I am amateur at best, so any technique or lack thereof that you may see is probably wrong. Anyways, let this cure up and then we'll start filling after I fix any things that I notice that need to be addressed before then. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think we are in good shape for what we're going to need to fill. Nothing more than an 1/8 inch at most. Most of it all is closer to a 1/16 or so. This is going to be the major filler spot. Man, mineral spirits makes me look like I have heart disease or something. Anyways, bring him back once we're ready. Alright, so I started doing some of the body work on this, which like I've said, there's not a single straight panel on this car, so we got our work cut out for us. So these were some creases. I picked up a Harbor Freight stud gun. Pretty happy with it. It seems to work really well. This was creased pretty bad, and now it just needs a skim coat of filler. Same here. This quarter panel is, or was, the worst part of the car, probably, maybe minus the passenger fender. I'll put up a picture of what it looked like. And just to reiterate, I am not a body man. I don't know what I'm doing, really. Hence why I'm not trying to, do like an instructional video of how to do body work. There's tons of them out there, and they're way better than I could do. But so far, I'm really happy with the progress we've made on this. If you look at the before picture, it must have taken an impact that pushed in and put a bunch of ripples in here. Then somebody tried to repair it poorly. So this had to be reshaped a lot. It still needs a little bit. It needs to come out here and stretch this metal because there's still a little bit of a ripple. But I mean, this is night and day to what it was, so I'm kind of surprised how well it came out. And I still got to chip away at it. Hopefully get a little bit better. But, if we got a bond, we're definitely going to have to filler it. But at the end of the day, it's not a show car, so it's not like we're going to try to get the metal to the point where it just needs a skim coat. We're going to have to use some on here. Certainly not more than an 1/8 inch or so. So I'm not really too worried about it, but we're not getting those ripples out. At least I'm not. Alright, so I've had the primer curing long enough now. I think it's been actually close to a week. I've given it plenty of time because it's been cold out, though it's kind of warm today with the sun. Now that we're fully cured, we can go ahead and do our filler. So I'm using 3M, I think it's Platinum Plus filler. It calls for the surface to be abraded with P80, or just 80 grit. So I'm going to go over here, we'll give everything a nice 80 grit scuff, and once I have this all scuffed up, we can apply our filler and see how it goes. Alright, I got our filler mixed up with 2% hardener by weight, so let's start spreading it on. First layer is thin, I just want to get it pushed into the pores. Alright, so go, first pass. Put that set up for 20 minutes to a half hour, we'll sand, and I'm sure we'll need to repeat. Alright, so the filler's cured all the way. Let's shape it with 80 grit to start with, and then we can go from there. Probably not going to need to go to finer grits because I'm sure we still got tons of low spots. Alright, so I've been doing a bunch of blocking, back and forth sanding, getting everything nice and flat. You can see I had to feather out quite a bit on these because before that seam, both the roof panel and the lower panel kind of dipped in, so there was a little bit of feathering I had to do, but I think it turned out really good. It's pretty much dead smooth. Not pretty much, it is dead smooth. I can't feel any kind of weird spots. It feels nice here. I was able to get this seam nicely following the body line for both sides. So I think we're going to probably call it here. There has been a lot of work in this, even though it doesn't really seem like it. Body work is just a can of worms. In the meantime, I'm going to keep picking away at all the dents and dings and scuffs and, well, smashes that are in this car because there's not a straight panel on it. Next time we're going to be getting this thing probably fully sprayed into primer. I don't know if we're going to be painting it, but I'll know by then. There's still lots more on the body to do, and we also will be taking a digression to reupholster all the seats and get the interior going. So until then, I will see you next time. Thanks for tagging along.